Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head over to Denmark once again, although this company is kind of American these days, but they did start off as one of the really famous Danish gypsy breweries. So we're going to return to Evil Twin Brewing once again. I think this was review number 6 or 7 from them, and we're having a taste of the Even More Coco Jesus today. This of course is a special variant of the Even More Jesus, one of the pinnacle Danish Imperial Stouts. It comes in at 12% ABV and they've added some maple syrup and coconut to this one, but it should be really nice. I think it was a 92 overall that it had on Rate Beer and a 99 within the style, so it should be a really good beer. My previous experiences with Evil Twin have been very positive, so we'll go into this one with an open mind and see what we get. I do hope that at some point I can review the Even More Jesus, and I did hope to do that one first of course, but this was the one that appeared in Durham Wines, and you know, when you see beers like this you have to have a go with them. This is the first time I'd actually seen this in the can to buy, so I thought, you know what, let's have a go at this beer, and as always I hope you guys enjoy my take on it. So anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery. If you want to get straight to the tasting, of course, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Evil Twin before. Like I say, this is number 6 or 7 and there will be more in the near future. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city or state, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for both the Danish beers that I've reviewed for you and for the American ones. This one will appear in both of those of course, because it is kind of half and half, but as always please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys, and the support that you give the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Evil Twin Brewing then before we taste the beer. So Evil Twin Brewing started off as a Danish gypsy brewery, and they were founded by Jeppe Bjergso back in 2010, and he of course is the twin brother of Mikkel Bjergso, who is the big boss at Mikkeller, one of the premier Danish craft breweries these days. But Jeppe began homebrewing in the same homebrewing group that gave birth to Mikkeller and of course later Toul, but he went on to found his own beer shop in the city called Ølbutikken, which is still there actually. I believe it's Victoria Gade, if I'm remembering correctly, that it's on. But it's in the southern part of the city, not too far away from the train station. Do some really nice beers, but that has changed hands a couple of different times. But you do get some great Danish beers and some American ones in there. But when he started up that company, he decided to start an import business and started bringing various different American craft beers into Denmark. And this shop of course distributed the early Mikkeller beers as well when they started doing the Evil Twin ones. So it was really a kind of hub of Danish craft beer in the very early days. But he later decided that it would be fun to start selling his own beers over in America as well, so he agreed a deal with 12% imports and sent his beers over to the States, and he later followed in 2012 with his wife, and then he decided to base Evil Twin Brewing in Brooklyn in New York, and now their beer is brewed at a variety of different host institutions. Most of their beer is actually brewed in Stratford in Connecticut, a little bit to the northeast of New York of course, but some of their beer is brewed by Poppels Brewery in Sweden. Some of the different stouts are brewed up there. I think they also brew some beer at the De Proef Brewery in Lokris de Heefte in Ghent in Belgium, and I think Brewdog has brewed some of their beers as well. So they brew their beers all over the place, but mainly they are still a gypsy brewery, although there was talk of them starting up their own brewery at some point too. But yeah, really interesting craft brewery these guys, and they are kind of famed for their imperial stouts. Most of the beers that I've had from them have been pretty good. The last beer I reviewed was the Molotov Cocktail, which was a triple IPA. Really interesting beer, and probably my favourites that I've had from them so far have been the Yin and Yang. One of course was an imperial IPA, the other one was an imperial stout, and if you mix these you could get some really interesting black IPAs, and it really just depended how you liked them. If you liked it a bit more roasty and toasty, a bit more imperial stout in it, but if you liked it a little bit more fruity, then you let it lean to the imperial IPA category. But they do some really interesting stuff, and like I say, if you haven't tried their beers, you really need to. The Even More Jesus is probably kind of up there with the likes of Herr Fredriksson and Black Hole and things like that in terms of being one of the kind of pinnacle Danish imperial stouts. So if you get the chance to try that, have a go at it, and hopefully I can review that for you at some point in the future. But like I say, I'm really excited to try this one, and I hope you guys enjoy my take on it. If you want to read a little bit more about the brewery, check out the links in the description below. But let's get on to the tasting of this beer itself. So yeah, I'll just bring up the camera and let you have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open it up. There you can see It's pretty simple. The Evil Twin beers tend to be quite modern and quite simple on this one. I do like how it kind of comes across there. You can see, nicely presented. I'll just read the little blurb to you that's on the side here. A few times in the history of craft beer, a highly praised beer rises beyond mortal stardom into a higher godly league. Usually the recipe to make such heavenly drops is thick fudge-like body, pitch black colour, amazingly overwhelming aromas of chocolate, coffee, dark fruits, muscovado sugar, maple syrup, coconut, and obviously only made in limited amounts. People, this is the taste of rare 12% alcohol by volume. The story, actually, one thing I was told, I bought this beer in Durham Wines, and one thing I was told was when he was brewing the original beer, when Jeppe was brewing the original Even More Jesus, he was talking to Mikkel, his brother. And they were talking about, he was trying to brew this big imperial stout, and apparently Mikkel said to him, you're putting even more malt in this, Jesus, and that's where the name Even More Jesus came from. And like I say, this is a special variant of that beer. But yeah, 12% ABV this one, maple syrup and coconut added to one of the pinnacle Danish imperial stouts. I guess it doesn't come much better than this. So without further ado, let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Really looking forward to this. So yeah, oh, you can smell some of that nice brown sugar coming out of this beer already. Just look at how dark that is. That's mental. But yeah, that's enough of it just now. There is still a little bit in the glass, but we'll leave it as is for the moment. But yeah, as you can see and as you would expect, this beer is poured a really dark ebony rosewood colour. There's a kind of half finger of a frothy, really dark tan head on this one. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones just heading up towards the bottom of the head there, but it has poured pretty much what you would expect from an imperial stout. You know, you can't really ask for much more than that. But let's take a closer look at the aroma then and see how we get on. Yeah, it's actually a little bit more roasty and toasty than I was expecting it to be. When you sugar it up a little bit more, it does get a little bit sweeter. You can smell the maple syrup coming out of it. You can smell a little bit of that kind of coconut character in there. But there's a little bit of a sweeter caramel note to it. The maple syrup is quite distinct on its own, but with this one you can smell a little bit of that roasted black malt just underpinning it. There's a wee bit of a sweet chocolate, an almost milky chocolate to it as well. But there's a nice kind of roasty, dark cocoa kind of thing too. But like I say, when you sugar the beer up a little bit, that's when you start to get the sweeter elements out of it. Definitely some woody notes in there, sort of woody and nutty characters as well, and that mixes really well with the coconut aspect. But yeah, some sweet milky chocolate, some darker, more dark high cocoa chocolate, if that makes sense. You can smell a little bit of that roasted black malt backbone in there as well. There's a wee bit of the earthy hops, and you can get just a little bit of a red kind of candied fruit from it as well, but that's very, very minimal, of course. The main focus of the aroma in this one is the brown sugar and the chocolate, and you can pick up the little bit of the coconut, and I don't know if it's hazelnut, but there is definitely a slightly sweeter, nutty character in there as well. It almost smells like there's a wee touch of vanilla or something coming out of it as well, but it does smell pretty much as you would expect from one of these big imperial stouts. But in terms of the overall aroma, it definitely leans more towards the kind of sweet side of things rather than the roasty toasty side of it. But as I always say, take a little bit of time and just enjoy the aroma of your beers before you get stuck into them. But this one certainly smells really pretty damn good. I think I paid like a £5 for this can, which is pretty cheap actually, considering that it's an American beer in terms of tax and stuff like that. I think I paid only like £5 for this, which is pretty cool. So it was quite cheap. As I said, I got this beer at Durham Wines in the little marketplace, so if you get the chance to go to Durham, definitely check out, because they have got some little gems like this, which is pretty cool. But yeah, really interesting smelling beer this. So without further ado, let's get stuck into it then. So this one is the Even More Coco Jesus from Evil Twin Brewing, based over in Brooklyn in New York, but originally one of the premier Danish gypsy breweries. Let's get stuck in. Skull, cheers. Yeah, that's pretty damn good. It's actually quite a little bit more carbonated than I thought it was going to be. Maybe that's just with the can, of course. But, you know, this is a damn good beer. It's a lot darker in the flavour than I was thinking it might be, actually. It does have a good bit more roasty and toasty character than the aroma would have you believe. But yeah, you can certainly, the first thing you're going to pick up on this beer as well is that 12% alcohol. It just has a nice boozy warmth. This is an ideal winter beer, this one. But you can tell straight away with it. You can see why it is so highly rated. As I always say, particularly when it comes to imperial stouts and stuff like this, sugar the beer around in your palate and just let your whole mouth adjust to it, because there is so much going on in it that you have to just let your mouth adjust to it before you start analysing it too much. And it's most definitely a sipper beer. But yeah, that's really nice. So with this one, as you would expect, you can feel a little bit of that roasted black malt just underpinning the beer. On top of that, it becomes a little bit smoother. There's almost a little bit of a kind of coffee-ish note to this one, which is quite interesting. It's not straight up and earthy in the way in that with that kind of coffee bean note, but there is almost just a little bit of a coffee flavour to this one. On top of that, there's a little bit of an almost bready character, but you can really feel that dark, high cocoa chocolate just coming out of this. There's some lighter, almost milkier chocolate as you go towards the middle of the palate there, and as you progress further and further into the aftertaste, that's when you start to get this light, almost wafery kind of maple syrup flavour coming out, which is really interesting. And the maple syrup really comes out as a little bit of an aftertaste. And then even further, you've seen how long it was since I took a sip of this one. That's when you start to get a little bit of this coconutty character as well. The coconut and the maple syrup for me are really coming out a little bit more in the aftertaste more than anything. Yeah, I think that's fair actually. I really am finding these little subtle flavours that they've added to the beer, they're definitely a little bit more prominent in the aftertaste compared to anything else. As my mouth is adjusting more and more to this beer, you do start to pick up a little bit of the darker, kind of more oily caramel coming out of this one. You can feel that it's a little bit more towards the front of the tongue, and there's this little bit of an almost roasted character just starts to push its way out a little bit more towards the front of the palate too. It's really interesting just how everything goes together so well in this beer. It's a big 12% beast, so perhaps the kind of darker caramel flavours that you're getting out of this one, maybe that to some degree is coming from the boozy element. I always find if you've got a higher alcohol content in the beer, you start to get a little bit more of the kind of dark caramelly boozy flavours coming out of it, and perhaps that's playing a role in this one. But yeah, it's a really pretty damn good beer this. I really want to try the original one now and just see how it comes across, but I am finding that maple syrup and kind of coconutty flavour is coming out a little bit more as my mouth starts to adjust more and more to this beer. Like I said, it was a bit more prominent in the aftertaste, and it probably will take you a few sips to fully adjust to what's going on in this beer, but I'm finding that coconut and maple syrup, I'm finding that they sit towards the front of the palate there, and they're a lot more prominent as you go further and further into the aftertaste of this beer, but they will come out a little bit more as your whole palate adjusts to it when you take a few sips. But, you know, make no mistake, this is a damn good beer. It does lean a little bit more towards the roasty and toasty side of things than you would expect from the aroma, but it does start to mellow out a little bit as your palate adjusts. But it's a cracking beer, that, no doubt. But yeah, pretty damn good. As I say, I really want to try the original and just see how it compares, but I do like that little bit of maple syrupy note and the coconut that comes out of it. Like I said, I'm finding that they are sitting towards the front of the palate there a little bit, just behind the front curve of the tongue. In terms of the hoppy notes on this beer, it's pretty much what you'd expect. In the back corners of the palate, there's a little bit of a slightly bitter earthiness. As you come further forward, it smooths out a little bit. There's maybe a tiny little bit of a herbal quality, but definitely it's more of a smooth earthiness, and that spreads all the way along the front sides of the tongue. As you go around the front curve of the palate, you could maybe detect a little bit of a grassy note from it, but really not very much at all. It really is mainly earthy, this one, and very slightly herbal. If you just go behind the front curve of the palate, there's a tiny little bit of a red fruity ester coming out of the beer. Yeah, I'd say if you just pay attention to that little oily bubble behind the front curve of your palate, there's a little bit of that red kind of fruity ester there. It's got a little bit of the sharpness that you'd expect from, say, like raisins or plums or something like that, but that's very minimal. It is kind of pushed back a little bit mainly kind of by the boozy character that you'd expect out of the beer, mainly just a little bit by that booziness that you would get out of it. But, you know, everything in this beer just goes together really well. That little bit of red fruity character gives it a bit of an edge, but the way that the hops kind of go together, the way that you have that roasty bitterness, or that dark bitterness from the earthiness, that blends together really well with the sort of roasty black backbone that this beer has. But, you know, the good way to sum this one up is just that everything blends together really well, and the subtleties that they've added to this beer, the maple syrup and the coconut, for me, they become a little bit more apparent as you go along, but they are coming out a little bit more in the aftertaste. But like I say, overall, it's a really damn good beer, and I'd love to try the original one and think about that in terms of like Herr Fredriksson from Amar Brauhaus, or you know, the Black Hole from Mikkeller, or something like that. It'd be really cool to see another one of these traditional Danish Imperial Stouts, so or pinnacle Danish Imperial Stouts I should say. They're not so traditional. Craft beer, of course, in Denmark is new, but it's a really cracking beer, this one. If you haven't had the chance to try it, I recommend that you do. I mean, the maple syrup, I really like that sort of almost caramelly, wafery flavour that it has, and it just adds another dimension to the beer, and I can only imagine that the original one is pretty cracking, so hopefully I can come across that for you at some point. But give this a go if you haven't had a try of it. It really is quite interesting. The coconut flavours as well. Coconut's not something that I normally go for, but in this it really does work, and it's the same as I've said to you before. I'm not such a big fan of coffee, but I can really appreciate a good coffee imperial stout or a good coffee stout or something like this, and this beer I would kind of judge in the same regard. The coconut with this just works really, really well. In terms of the mouthfeel then, I think I would say this one is pretty much full-bodied. Yeah, no doubt in my mind about that. It's full-bodied. The carbonation is quite smooth. It does have a little bit of a prickle, but overall it is quite a smooth beer. The mouthfeel overall is very, very oily. There's a good balance in this one in the malt base between the sweetness and the sort of roasty bitter backbone. It is a little bit more roasty than you would expect from the aroma, but overall when it does balance out on your palate a bit more, it does lean a little bit more towards the sweetness. There's a good bit of hoppy bitterness, but that smooths out along the side of your palate, and there's a little bit of a juicy, fruity character to it as well. So it kind of has everything that you would expect from the style, and it's got quite a lot of complexity as well. So for beer reviewers like me, it is a pretty good one to have a go at, and for those who just enjoy a good imperial stout, I think you are going to enjoy this one. So yeah, it's been really cool to get around to reviewing one of these big imperial stouts from Evil Twin. Like I say, I hope I can review the original Even More Jesus for you at some point, but it's been really cool to review this one, and I hope you guys have enjoyed my take on it as well. So this was Even More Coco Jesus from Evil Twin Brewing, who started out, like I say, as a Danish gypsy brewery, but are now based over in America. A really cracking beer that has a lot of complexity to it, and if that's what you're into, if you want something that tests your palate, then this is certainly going to do that. But overall, as an imperial stout on its own, it's a cracking beer, and I recommend you have a go at it. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Do check out all my usual social media. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below, and let me know what your favourite beers are from Evil Twin as well. And do give me any recommendations from either American breweries or Danish breweries that you'd like me to have a go at. But it's been really good to review this one for you, and I'm sure I'll catch you again very soon. Even More Coco Jesus from Evil Twin Brewing over in Brooklyn in New York in America. Originally though, a Danish craft brewery. Cheers.